All right, ladies and gentlemen, the vacation has come to an end, and I'm rocking my White Lotus wallpaper shirt here. But no, welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my final recap, breakdown, and review of Season 1 of The White Lotus. We're talking Episode 6, which was titled Departures. And look, we got all of our questions answered, and we finally find out who's in that box. We're going to break it all down here in this spoiler review, but before we do so, make sure you all are checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you all can get the alert for when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed this spoiler discussion of The White Lotus, so make sure to like and share this video. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate the support. And in those comments, let's talk about the finale, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know, were you satisfied? Were you disappointed? What were some of your favorite moments, your least favorite moments? And were you right about who was going to be in that box? And also, we're going to talk about an announcement that we got earlier this week for Season 2, but where would you like to see a Season 2 be? And are we talking any fan casting? Who would you like to see be a part of this new cast? And let's just talk about the season as a whole. Your favorite episode, favorite character, least favorite character. Let's have a fun discussion in the comments below. So, just a little quick plug. Hope you all were able to join the live watch along that we did for the finale. If not, I'm going to leave the link in the bio. You can watch it with us, the commentary and all that fun stuff, but we made it to the finale. It is bittersweet because obviously we wanted to know how it was going to end, and obviously we didn't want it to end because it was such a fun show, and just the ratings each and every week got higher. And then of course this brings me right into this next piece of news here. Earlier this week we got the announcement, as you all can see on the screen now, that we will be getting a Season 2 of The White Lotus. Now HBO, you're still on my bucket list, my shit list for not bringing back Lovecraft Country, but hey, you know, we're getting a Season 2 of The White Lotus, and they announced that, you know, Mike will be back writing, directing, and producing, you know, and being part of the structure of Season 2, which is great news. But we're getting a whole new cast and a whole new location, so that's a little, you know, disappointing because I would like to see some of these characters, maybe, who knows, you know, this is just the initial announcement. This is part one of a maybe early script. Maybe there are opportunities for characters to make an appearance, but if not, we're getting a brand new location. We're getting a brand new group of people on a vacation, and yeah, The White Lotus Season 2. I don't know when we're going to see Season 2. Maybe next year, maybe the year after that, but whenever we get it, I'm excited to check it out. But let me know if you were excited for those news. And again, do you have a location you would like to see them go? Because it will be another White Lotus hotel. So where in the world would you like to see Season 2 take place? And again, do you have any fan casting? Because I would have never predicted to have loved this cast as much as I did in Season 1. And who would have ever predicted them to ever be working together? So do you guys have like a particular actor or actress you would like to see be in the White Lotus? Let's discuss it in the comments. So just general thoughts before we get into the recap. I had to think about the finale for a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, it did a good job of capturing what it's like to leave a vacation, right? Because whenever you leave a vacation, you're always just kind of like, oh man, I gotta go back to regular life. I gotta go back to school or work or this, that, and the other. And we have that mindset, right? But obviously our characters, they're going back with a different mindset because one of them killed somebody. You know, other people were part of a heist. Other people thought that they were going to be having a business. So there are some different emotions that our characters have. But I think that this finale does truly encapsulate what it feels like to leave a vacation and going back to your life. At least one of our characters didn't want to go back to their life, which we'll talk about in this review. So overall, this wasn't my favorite episode, but I thought that it concluded in a satisfying manner for me. The moments we got in this episode were very satisfying, especially that moment when we find out who's in that box. So overall, I was pretty happy, but I can see where some people might be disappointed. But for me personally, I enjoyed this episode. Again, it wasn't my favorite. Episode 4 is still clear top number 1 for me. I'll never get over the last shot of episode 4, but this was a really satisfying finale. But again, let me know your general thoughts in the comments. So let's get into the recap here, ladies and gentlemen, as the episode opens up with Quinn yet again on his canoe with his new friends. And it's funny how the show opens with Quinn and the show ends with Quinn, and we'll talk about his decision towards the end of this review here. But cut to our honeymooners, right? We see Rachel in bed, and she looks like she's having a full-on panic attack. And we'll really dive deep into Rachel in this episode, in this review, and kind of talk about how you all feel about her decision at the end. But, you know, Shane's kissing her, and she's just like the look on her face is like, I've made a terrible decision, as she said last week, but she looks to go back on that decision later in this episode. But mornings with the Mossbachers have always been my favorite thing about this show. This and when we go to dinner. So we open again, we see our Mossbacher family, and Paula's texting Kai, and obviously he's not responding because we find out what happens to Kai, and Olivia's just like, who's you texting? What you doing? All up in her business as Paula continues to lie about the situation, and we'll talk about them as well as this breakdown. But that whole conversation is disrupted because Mark is getting his monkey business on with his wife finally for the first time this entire vacation. They're having sex, ladies and gentlemen, as he says, I guess this is what vacation feels like, as Nicole calls him Superman for saving the day the other day. And they're at lunch, or I should say at breakfast, having and looking like the sweetest couple on the island. Again, seeing them kind of, the whole series is kind of going, you can just tell that there's tension, and they're just kind of in the marriage just to be in the marriage. But now that changed their life. Your life, obviously they weren't going to die, but they didn't know that, right? They didn't know how, who Kai was. So it goes to show you that, man, a life can change right in front of your eyes. But speaking of couples, let's talk about Tanya and Greg. And we mentioned it with some people in the comments last week. They assumed that Greg was coughing because he was maybe wanting to get out of the situation with Tanya being in the room, but no, he has a coughing problem. We learn out what about his health issues a little bit later, but she is obviously concerned, and she is just head over heels for this guy, and the stuff that she says she wants to do with him later in this episode, and what she does to Belinda. We've been talking about it for weeks, and we'll talk about that scene here in a second. But nonetheless, we see Shane, and he asks Mark, which I believe this is their first time interacting, because I know Shane interacted with Olivia and Paula, but this is the first time he's spoken to the husband and wife of this family, and he asks about the eye, and she goes into the story. He goes into the story as well, Mark, and we just see Paula just, again, just like the look of concern. It's just like a million things has to be going through her head. Number one, where is Kai? Is he going to snitch on me? Do they know? Will Olivia snitch on me? It's just like you can just see all the look in her face, just like my life is over. But again, we'll talk about her having that moment with her best friend a little bit later in the review. But another first time reaction as we get Belinda speaking with Rachel, and Rachel is just, again, she's a mess this entire episode. She's going through it, ladies and gentlemen, mentally speaking, and she kind of gets into my marriage, and then she kind of stops herself, and Belinda being the sweet person that she is, and I feel so bad for Belinda, and we'll talk about her in that moment. But she gives her a car. She's someone that is, you can just tell she's that type of person that we all know in life, that is just, no matter what they're going through, they're always willing to give an open arm, an open ear, and just be there for them. And Belinda, we'll talk about her, but I feel so bad. But nonetheless, the new enlightened Quinn here, as he's coming back from the canoe, and he's just happy as he could be, right, smiling from ear to ear. And his parents like, hey kid, hey buddy, you miss breakfast this morning. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. And Mark's like, hey, we're gonna go scuba diving here in an hour, buddy. You excited? He's like, no, I'm kind of beat because of what I did earlier today. And he's like, well, this is the only day that we have to do this, Quinn, so you're gonna do it, buddy. He's like, well, I don't know about this being my last day, because I'm not going home, by the way. I'm gonna stay here. And we just see Nicole and Mark like, are you kidding? You're 16. You have a life. You're not staying here, Quinn. That's the end of it. And you can just see the disappointment on Quinn's face. But Quinn is the one with the last laugh at the end of this episode. But back to Rachel and Shane. Shane is on the phone with the travel agent, which I wonder if we'll see the travel agent make an appearance in season 2. That would be really interesting, because obviously he has connections with the boss and all this stuff. So we'll see if we'll find out who that travel agent is. We've only heard him on the phone. Maybe he'll make an appearance in season 2. But nonetheless, Shane again dealing with this hotel situation, and we get the moment. This was a pretty good scene to me. The acting between the two actors, the tension in the room. You felt the tension in the room, and you felt the awkwardness in the room as we go into this conversation. And Shane goes into the situation with the Mossbachers, and like this hotel, why wouldn't? And I will say, Shane is an asshole, but he's had some good points in this season. This is one of them. And let me know, because I know there's some people that watch these reviews that said they've worked in the hotel business. Should the White Lotus had told the travelers and the guests that there was a robbery of that type of capacity? Is it their obligation to tell them? I'm just curious. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. But nonetheless, we see Shane being like, oh, I wish I had a gun. I wish I had a baseball bat. And then as soon as he grabbed that knife, I'm like, dude, that's not going to be a good thing. I was thinking, honestly, in my head, I'm like, he's going to accidentally maybe stab his wife, Rachel, in, thinking that someone's in the room. But It didn't play out that way, but it kind of did, and we'll talk about that moment a little bit later. But as soon as he grabbed that knife, I'm like, that is gonna come back later in the episode, and it surely did. But we see him and her having the conversation, and she flats out tells him, I made a mistake by marrying you. And again, just the play-by-play and them just going at it, and Shane initially laughing, and then, you know, we see Rachel giving her point of view of the situation, and going over her coming off of a breakup situation with work, and then he came into the life, and he was giving her a fantasy life, right? Going out of town and traveling the city and the luxurious lifestyle. So she was kind of swept up in all this. He was handsome. He asked to marry her, and she said yes. And again, it kind of, you can kind of see where she's coming from in a certain extent, but you know, I don't feel bad for her in that moment, because as she's kind of giving this moment, it's just like, well, regardless of how we feel about Shane being an asshole or not, it wasn't his fault, right? He's just thinking, hey, this attractive woman is smiling and happy. I'm having a good time with her. There seems to be no problems. Why not marry her? She could be my trophy wife, as you know, we know that he wants her to be. So it kind of, you know, is an interesting situation. Let me know what you all feel about when Rachel finally reveals how they came to be, because that was something that we've always been talking about. How did she not see these red flags? Was he just charming? Was he just put on a front? But no, she just had a facade. She had her fantasy that was just, she was in a whirlwind. It's like she mentioned, all the stuff going down at once. He seemed to be her knight in shining armor, but he wasn't the guy that she thought he was. And she's saying that, again, she doesn't want to be a trophy wife. She wants to gain her respect back. And this is where Shane, he goes in on her and just being like, you know what? I thought that you were cool and calm and confident and normal. I was like, oh, this is getting ugly really, really quick. And he ends up calling her naive and a child and a baby. And this is where she comes back at him like, oh, I'm the baby, says the man baby in this room with your mom, and the whole thing with Armond, you're the real baby. And it was just like, they were throwing some haymakers in that moment, but he throws the ultimate haymaker by saying, threatening her, like, you don't want to go down this path with me, trust me. And I don't know if it was at that moment where she was just like thinking about the conversation he had with Nicole and the prenup and just all that stuff. I don't know if it's that just the moment where she kind of clicked like, maybe I don't want to go down this path with this psycho. But nonetheless, we end up catching up with what happens to Kai as the Mossbachers are about to go scuba diving. Armond comes up to them and say, hey, you got some good news. We got all your stuff that was taken, which they say all this stuff. I thought he just took the bracelets, but apparently there were other things missing in the safe. I'm not really too sure about the is that a plot hole, or did I miss something? I thought he just took the bracelets, but nonetheless, they have their possessions, and the person turned himself in, and we see Olivia asks Armond, you know, he says it was an employee, and she said, oh, what was his name? And she says Kai, and then obviously Olivia looks at Paula, and it's just like, is she gonna snitch on her friend? We'll talk about that in a second, but let me know in the comments, and this is just generally speaking as far as the Paula character. Should she have told that she didn't commit the crime, but she's technically a part of the crime. She knew about it. She provided the code. Should she have spoken up and had said something? Now, again, obviously, I don't know if she would have went to, I don't know what happened to Kai. Like, we don't know I assume he goes to, Hawaiian jail. I don't know for how long. I don't know. It sounded like he turned himself in from the conversation. Again, we didn't really get all the details. I don't know. Let me know now. Did you guys want to know how that all played out? I don't think we needed it, but I don't know what the situation would have been if Paula would have told the truth, but I just want to know from you all, should she have told the truth and say that I kind of maybe, I don't know, in a court of law if this would have held up, but I kind of pushed him to do this, and I gave him the information to get the code. So let me know, how do you all feel about Paula? Should she have spoken up, or should she just had kept that to her grave, or now kept that with her best friend because she ends up telling her the truth a little bit later? So let's talk about that in the comments below. But moving forward, everybody wants a piece of Miss Tanya as this younger, I've seen that actor before. He wasn't on the IMDb, but I've seen that actor's face before. But nonetheless, a younger dude comes up to Tanya. She's just like, no, I'm already taken, but I appreciate it, as Greg is coming back from the pool, and he's like having a conversation, and she's like, Tanya is just that type of person that just needs attention. When you give it to her, she wants to give you the world, as we'll talk about with her situation with Belinda later. But she tells Greg, hey, you want to go to Aspen? I could rent a house. And he's like, yeah, I just want to have some fun, which speaks to his logic of just having fun, because he might drop any moment now. But nonetheless, I'm just like, Tanya, you're going down this path, and we'll talk about the conversation with Belinda, but you're doing it again with Greg, because this is a transactional situation, because you're talking about renting a house. That is a financial obligation there. So she's a mess. She is a hot mess, as we all know. But nonetheless, we get to this beautiful shot of Quinn and Mark in the water, and that's kind of overshadowed by seeing Paula throwing up in the water, which again, she's just like, my world is about to end. I think she was maybe thinking about maybe confessing. I don't know if she was at that moment or not, but ultimately we see her crying on the side of the boat as the Mossbachers are celebrating, and Nicole's like, we're so lucky to have each other. She takes that bracelet that Kai made for her and throws it in the water, and I think that's just her saying bye to Kai and wiping her hands of the situation potentially. So again, should she have told the truth in the situation? Let me know, ladies and gentlemen. But back to Shane and Rachel, as this guy is on another level. As he leaves the room, goes for a swim, comes back to the room being like, Rachel, why don't you double lock the door? I told you there's a psycho running around the hotel, and then just goes in the shower, and she's like, you don't want to talk about what we just talked about maybe a couple hours ago? She's just, again, I just want to know what Rachel was thinking in this entire episode. The face was there. I thought that, the acting was there, but I just want to know inside her head what she was thinking throughout this entire episode. But time to get the call that Armand's been avoiding this entire time since, having this back and forth with Shane. He gets the call from a character by the name of John, and we don't hear John, but we end up hearing that he ultimately tells him he's going to speak to Randy in the morning, and Belinda asks, oh, what's going on, Armand? And he says, I just got the news, I'm getting fired, which those were just the words he was looking for to really go back into that dark hole, because he goes down a hole in this episode and goes ready to party as he invites Dylan to have some drugs and to have a good time, and that was the decision that led him to another decision that ended up ending his life, which we'll talk about. But time to confess, as Olivia comes to straight out to Paula and being like, hey, why are you down? Is it because you're worried about going to jail? And she goes on about the obvious connections between her and Kai and the heist and all that stuff. But so maybe Olivia is a friend, because she says, just tell me what happened. Do you need money? I won't rat you out. And, we see this conversation being had, and this is where I thought that, I'm like, Paula, you need to maybe chill out a little bit, because she's going at Olivia and being like, you're part of the tribe. You'll always be part of this tribe, and you're just using me as a prop. And that really hit Olivia in the feels, because we see, because she's also mentioned about you steal things too, and she's talking about her boyfriends, obviously. So I'm just like, damn, Paula's kind of ruthless, but she's not ruthless enough to tell the truth about the situation with Kai to the authorities. But nonetheless, we see Olivia, that really hurt her, because she goes to her mom and starts crying. I'm like, wow, this is the first time all season we've really seen Olivia break down, which kind of goes to the point that in a weird way, she does care for Paula, and Paula's, words cut deep to her. If Paula wasn't someone that meant something to Olivia, those words would just came one in one ear and out the other, right? But that really cut her deep. So it does kind of show. And again, they both have a really weird and very toxic friendship, if I were to say the least. But nonetheless, going back to the moment that we've all kind of anticipated and kind of knew this was going to happen, especially when Greg got in the mix. But Tanya tells Belinda that she's not going to open up this business with her. And she goes into this whole thing about her having these relationships, these transactional relationships. I'm like, you're literally in one right now. But, I feel so bad for Belinda, even though she gave her an envelope full of money. And I'm not sure how much that money was, but it looked like it was thick. And it looked like, hey, if she wanted to start her own business with or without Tanya, which I think that was a good idea, to not go in business with that crazy lady, that was a nice little, I feel bad for her, but at the same time, it's like at least her kindness, because she could have snapped, right? If it was, me or, I would have been a little bit upset, but she kept her composure. And that goes to speak to her character. She kept her composure, took the money, which is good on her, but, she didn't lash out on her, which I think was a good thing. But I'm just like, we all kind of saw Tanya doing that. I mentioned weeks ago that she seems like that type of person. If you give her an inch of attention, she's going to give you a whole mile of hers, and we see that now with Greg. But we see, again, showing Belinda's character. She goes right back to work. She answers the phone. And again, this is, I think, I put in my notes, this is the fourth time we saw a character cry in this episode, which just kind of speaks to the timbre tone, the kind of dramatic tone, and just kind of the emotion that came from this episode. A lot of characters were breaking down this episode, and one character broke down so much it ended up killing them. But going to high as a kite, Armand at this point, he's high as hell as we get the slow-mo shot of him just seating everyone. He nails it, right? He's just so happy that he got everyone seated perfectly. But he is like super on another level as we get him getting, the menus to everyone. And again, just Armand is just like, he's living his final moments, ladies and gentlemen. So we see Shane say something to Rachel I didn't expect, saying like, hey, whenever you get out of this funk, I'll be here for you. I'm your husband and I love you. And that doesn't really change her mind, because she just keeps on saying like, I don't know what it is. I just don't want to be with you. As he lashes out, hits the table, and, he says, you know what? You'll just be alone. And he leaves the table. And maybe that was the moment. Him saying, you're going to end up alone. And just think of Rachel's arc in this season. There were so many moments that she felt alone, and she doesn't want to go back to being alone. Her mom wasn't able to take her calls, being able to not have a conversation with her husband. I think that she doesn't like the idea that she has to be alone. So maybe that was the moment she's like, you know what? I'm going to suck up my pride and just be with this man. So after that, we get this variety of shots of seeing the different characters. Armond is now having a party. Hutch is in the mix. They're all doing drugs. We see Shane having a drink at the bar by himself. We see Greg continuing to cough, and then he actually admits to Tanya that he has a health issue. He didn't get into details what it is, but let's just say he can drop dead at any point. So I'm like, oh, maybe my whole Shane knife killing Rachel was out of the equation, but no, he stayed alive. But I think that was a red herring. But he says that he can drop dead at any point, which I think eventually, even though, again, who's to say? They're saying we're not going to get any of these characters in season 2. We might get a quick glimpse of the Greg Tanya situation. Who knows? But nonetheless, we see, which it does explain why Greg is staying with this crazy lady, because he's just like, my days are running close to an end. I'm just going to have as much fun as I want. Yeah, you want to have sex, you want to go to Aspen, let's do whatever you want, because I'm going to be dead any day now. So that kind of explains why he's just so kind of free going, right? At least in my opinion. So cut to the show really kind of shifting gears and kind of getting a little bit more darker, right? We see these shots of the woods and it's nighttime now. We go to their Armond goes out of the party and just is replaying all the bad moments he's had with Shane, and he makes his way to the Patton's room, which, oh my goodness, we'll talk about that here in a second. But I do want to go back to Olivia and have her embrace and hug Paula, which again just speaks to just their toxicity in this relationship. I don't know, is this a good friendship? Should they be embracing each other? They're very, very toxic. But nonetheless, the moment happens, ladies and gentlemen. As we see Armond makes his way into the room, he sees their bag. He proceeds to poop and pee in the bag, and Shane makes his way into the room. And as soon as he made his way into the room, I'm like, yep, bye-bye Armond. But before we go to that moment, I will say we do have a moment between Rachel and Belinda, and Rachel just venting to her, and Belinda's like, you know what, I don't have any advice, I'm out, which I think is so good for her. Just like all these white rich women, or all these white women coming to her with their problems, whether it's her job or her outside of her job. I'm glad that she walked out of that moment. Again, Rachel is alone, so I think that's just another little red flag. She's like, I don't like this feeling, so I'm just gonna just go back to this man who, I don't really love per se, but at least I won't be alone, which speaks to her character on its own. But back to the moment. As Shane makes his way to the room, he hears that Rachel has her own room, and then he's sniffing around, makes his way to the bag, sees the pee, sees the poop, calls the front desk. We see Armond trying to sneak out of the room. Unfortunately, Shane picks up that Michael Myers knife. We see the scene, we see the way it's shot, and as soon as Armond hits the corner, boom, stabbed right in the chest, falls in the tub, and bye-bye to my favorite character of the entire show. So beautifully played, such a great actor, such a great character. Bye-bye, R.I.P. to Armond. I know a lot of you all have been saying it for weeks. We think Armond's going to be dead. He's going to be in the box. But in my mind, I was like, why would he be in the box? Where would they be taking him? Why would Shane be looking out of the window? This looks like he cares about the person. It could have been his mom, who I was thinking. It could have been Rachel, which I was thinking by this episode. But no, it was Armond who was in the box. I assume they're taking the body to, his native land. It's like he was Australian. And it makes sense why Shane was looking out the window, because he was responsible for the death of Armond. As we get this beautiful shot of the mountains, and, we see Shane, I assume he just called the police, told them what happened. Obviously, it's kind of, I don't want to say self-defense, but, he didn't murder him intentionally. He thought that someone broke into his room and thought that maybe something was going to happen. So I guess it is self-defense to a certain extent. So we wrap up the episode with Quinn, another character, crying because he knows this is the last time that he's going to be on the beach maybe, but he's crying as Tanya's throwing out her mother's ashes finally in the ocean. I thought that he was going to maybe shout at her, because again, we know that he's now Mr. Earthman and cares so much about the environment. But flash forward to the first shot of the episode or the season, where we see Shane looking at Armond's body being taken away, and we see him see Rachel, and we see them talk, and Rachel says, I'm fine now, I'm going to be happy, I promise you I'm going to be happy. So that just, I guess she's content with this being a trophy wife. So that's how their story ends. We see Tanya and Greg making their way to Honolulu. We see the Mossbachers just being normal. The girls are reading their books. Mark and Nicole seem to be good, and Quinn's in line. But Quinn turns around, which, by the way, I guess this is like Home Alone. I don't know why they didn't notice the sun didn't get on the plane, but they left, and we end up the last shot. As I had mentioned, we see before we get to the last shot, we see Belinda with a stone face, and then she puts on a smile. As we see, it looks like Armond has been replaced by this new guy, as we see the new group of people coming to the island. And the last shot of the season is of Quinn on the canoe with his new friends. End of the episode, end of season 1. Just my overall thoughts. This was an incredible show. It's not my favorite show of the year, but it was a pleasant surprise for me, because I thought it was going to be like a show I was going to enjoy, but I ended up really loving the show. I thought the writing was great, the acting was fantastic. It was a great balance of satire, comedy, dark comedy. Obviously, the conversations that were had with social commentary that wasn't forced. It was just kind of organically thrown into the show, which I liked, and seeing how people of privilege look at certain situations, and just the way the show handled that was good. Again, the comedy was there for me. Armond was my favorite character. Episode 4 is my favorite episode. And I thought this was a really great show, and I'm really excited to see what they do with the season 2. Again, I have no idea where I would like to see them go. Maybe Greece, maybe somewhere overseas. That would be fun. And like I said, I have no fan casting. I would just love to see another great cast come together, and maybe a sprinkle of some of the characters from this season make an appearance again. Maybe the travel agent. Maybe we see Shane's mom being on a trip or something. I don't know. Kitty was her name. But I would love to see maybe one of those characters make an appearance. But yeah, I'm excited for season 2. I really enjoyed season 1. I really enjoyed this finale, and I had a really good time with the show. But more importantly, I had a good time with the show with you all. I appreciate you all watching these reviews, liking them, sharing them. I know this is going a little bit over time with the breakdown, but that just goes to show how much fun I have with the show and how much fun I've had with you all. So again, for everyone that's liked the video, watched the video, shared the video, commented, it means a lot to me. And we'll be back with more reviews, not only on HBO. We got a lot of hit shows coming this fall, like Succession Season 3, which I can't wait for. But we have some other shows. Nicole Kidman had The Undoing last year. She's going to be having her Hulu show, 9 Perfect Strangers, that I'm going to be reviewing pretty soon. We're going to be looking at Season 10 of American Horror Story. There's a couple other new shows, Murdering Hotel or Apartment with Steve Martin and all of them. So keep an eye out for a lot more content. We got the new season of Marvel What If. So if you like these reviews and you like other variety shows that I watch, check out those reviews. Check out my movie reviews. If you stuck around to end this video, thank you so much. Make sure to like, share, comment below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other future TV reviews, movie reviews, watch-alongs, and all the fun things we do on this very channel. Hope you all enjoyed these reviews. Hope you enjoyed this review. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll see you on the next video.